Now, across the African continent, journalism is caught between principle and pressure. From government crackdowns on the sector to issues of, press freedom as well as freedom of speech, and most importantly, to regulatory overreach. Journalists continue to face threats that go beyond censorship, ranging from arbitrary arrest to physical intimidation and media shutdowns. In Ghana, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and that's the CRJ, recently urged President Mahama to end the culture of impunity and restore public confidence in press freedom. In Cameroon, the praise surrounding the release of a student journalist belies the fragility of media protections in the country, especially for younger, under-established voices. Back home here in Nigeria, the sudden closure of Badeggi Radio in Niger State has sparked national debate. While state authorities cite licensing issues, observers see it as a pattern of a larger pattern of intolerance toward independent journalism. That the Federal Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris Malagi, has to appeal for calm, and he also spoke volumes about the tension between media and political power. It's a reminder that even in a democracy, the airwaves can be stifled without warning.
Press freedom is not a luxury, it's a necessity. In a continent where misinformation, political instability, and weak institutions often blur the lines between fact and fear, an independent press stands as the last firewall between the public and propaganda. So to start this critical conversation, we are going to be joined by a host of guests who will be joining us. We are expecting to be joined by Honourable Binta Mamman. Let's put that out first. Commissioner for Information and Strategy in Niger State. This is following the instance from Niger State here in Nigeria regarding Badeggi FM. Here on Zoom, joining us now, Mr. Akin Agbejule, FNIPR broadcaster and member of the National Governing Council of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, sir. And also on video, we have Harriet Atyang, Station Manager, Dada Radio Kenya. Thank you very much for joining us, Harriet. So we're going to be beginning with you, Mr. Akin. Mr. Akin, first off, you are in Niger State, where we had the very instance that we spoke about in our intro here. Could you first of all give us an overview of what exactly it is like working in Niger State, being a press personnel?
Well, I'd like to say that it's a very convenient and convivial environment working as a professional here and elsewhere. And I think that government, media have had very good relationship over time, over the years. I'll let you know that we are now having upcoming and new media coming into the fray. And of course, new establishments, for instance, the Badeggi is new. And there are certain ropes to be learned in the practice and the environment, which of course is still being learned. So the fact that they are having some contentions at this point is the fact of a learning curve which they have to go through in terms of the decorum, in terms of the sentiments, in terms of the content and context of broadcast. I think that's what really the contention is. It's not as if the environment, it's been very good. Government has been reaching out through media to the people. And of course, the media have been reaching out through the people to the government. But the contention is the newness and the fact that when you are in an environment, you have to acculturate the environment to be able to do the best that you're going to do for the best of the good of the people and the media. So that, I think, is where we are, and it's still a learning curve here.
As we've just been informed that our commissioner, we were expecting her earlier, she just joined us right here, and that's Binta Mamman. She's the Commissioner, Ministry of Information and Strategy, Niger State. Honourable Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on. Whilst we are trying to fix your visuals, let me quickly speak to Harriet Atyang here. Now, Harriet, you are the station manager for Dada Radio Kenya. And that means that, you can bring a wider, perspective on this, giving, from East Africa and all that, the country also faces when it comes to, press freedom and, speaking truth to power. Recently, given the protests that's happening in the capital there and what we've seen from the fallout of the protests. What is it like, staying true to, reporting and being honest in terms of your reportage and sort of striking balance with public sentiments and, government interference?
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to be here. Just as you've stated, we have seen in the past or in the recent days a lot happening in this country of ours, and journalism continues to be more challenging, especially with the current world, the way things are done in the current world. It has continued to be a challenge in terms of, being free to express yourself as a journalist and, having to always watch your back, because you don't know when, when you will be attacked. We've recently seen journalists being attacked not only by police, but also in some regions of this country where, we say it's a very democratic country, but again, we have regions where some, the communities are supporting a particular, side of the political, divide. And as a journalist, you find that maybe going to that areas, you find that journalists are somehow profiled during their work, and it becomes such a huge challenge for us. From this side, you have the police and the government, and the other side, you also have the community, sometimes tending to profile journalists as in terms of maybe some are taken to be maybe supporting a certain political side. Those are things that are happening, and it's becoming more challenging to be a journalist actually in the current world.
Becoming more challenging. And we actually note that we see the visuals even here in Nigeria, especially with the riots, or rather I wouldn't call that riot, protests, my apologies, with the protests that happens that mostly involve the younger generation, the Gen Zs who are rising up in dissent with the government. So I'm wondering exactly how news coverage in Kenya carries on. How do you, survive? How do you navigate perhaps maybe hostilities? We also saw the actions of the police, of which the press are very vocal against. How do you navigate these different little challenges that you have in Kenya as a press person without being a victim yourself?
One is to ensure that you are as neutral as possible, because as the ethics demand, we are not supposed to take sides. So, and another thing is make sure you are as factual as possible. You state the facts, and ensure that you're not biased in your reporting. And another thing, so far we have seen that it's a bit tricky reporting, violence or maybe riots. And what has helped us, sometimes you just have to maybe, we have so far been helped so much by social media, where sometimes you just have to, stick around and also follow other channels where you can find more information. And again, on the ground, you ensure that at least you have other sources. For example, the administration, maybe the other departments that are willing to maybe share information. But honestly speaking, it is not easy to cover such stories like riots in this country.
Riots in the country, indeed. Harriet, we have to let you go for now, but I must say thank you so much for taking out the time to join us. But before we go, very quickly, I want to ask about the entry of Gen Zs into press as well, and the establishment, or rather the move, the initiative to want to establish more Gen Z voices in press and media. Do you see that happening with, this going on the grounds in Nairobi and as well as across Kenya? Do you see more younger voices coming on into press to sort of establish themselves and give voice to the voiceless?
Yes, that is so much happening. And to a large extent, I must confess that has helped a lot, because we are having a new generation of, fearless people. This generation is becoming more fearless and more bold and more courageous in terms of expressing themselves, in terms of sharing the information they have, and in terms of, advocating for their rights. So it's actually, for me, a good thing to have this Gen Z generation getting into the media because they are more bold and more courageous, as compared to maybe the other generations. I don't know whether I'm in the other generation, but if you look at the kind of journalism that was there before, you realize that there is a shift in terms of the boldness and the courage, in terms of the way the people express themselves. So it is a good thing that a new generation is coming up, a new, more bolder and more courageous generation is actually coming up, and we highly welcome that. This will also ensure that democracy, is established, and also is also ensured in the country, that there is democracy. So having such a group of young people coming on board, taking on in the media, taking on the political sphere, and taking on, in the different sectors, it is a good thing. And for me, it's a welcome move, and I believe that it will help in terms of, ensuring, also promoting and fighting for press freedom, not only in East Africa, but also in the other parts of the world. And we welcome this. And me as an individual, I highly welcome this move, and I welcome this new generation to take on in the career of journalism, and in terms of also sharing information.
Oh, we welcome them.
Thank you very much for speaking with us. Now let's welcome our Honourable Commissioner for Information, Niger State, Honourable Binta Mamman. She is on with us. Honourable, you're welcome. We waited a while for you, and we're happy that you can join us. We're going to go straight into it and ask about the instances here in Nigeria. We're taking a look across Africa, however, but let's talk about Nigeria and the instance in Niger State. Now, your agency put out, your commission put out a press release only just last week regarding the instance that emanated from the Badeggi FM closure. However, we are aware that it wasn't closed. It was, well, dialogued about, and you came up with that statement reaffirming your commission's duty to freedom of the press. Could you please talk us through that statement which you put out?
First, let me thank you for this question, and good morning, viewers. Let me be very clear here that the Niger State government, under the leadership of His Excellency, the former Governor Muhammad Umar Bago, has no agenda at all to stifle dissent or restrict press freedom in Niger State. Our administration recognizes the media as a critical partner in governance, nation building, and accountability. The recent concern about Badeggi FM stemmed from allegations of unprofessional conduct and incitement, which could have serious implications for public peace. So as soon as that concern was raised by His Excellency, in the heat of that discussion, he expressed the view that such conduct must be addressed decisively. And however, the ministry sat with relevant stakeholders to look into the matter and refer this matter to NBC, which we did. We wrote a letter to NBC to intimate them about our complaint concerning Badeggi.
All right, Honourable.
Honourable, you just pointed out that Badeggi made some incitatory comments. I would like to ask what those comments were, and how severe that they were, so much that it prompted the state government to alert the NBC.
Well, like I earlier mentioned, we have submitted our report, our complaint to NBC, which we know is a regulatory body that has the power to either revoke or sanction any broadcasting station. And I would not like to mention those issues because our complaints are already in the letter that we have submitted. And I want to use this platform to urge the NBC to ask Badeggi Radio to submit their docket, and I'm sure from there they will be able to pick those complaints that we have laid against Badeggi Radio.
So, Madam, to make it clear, the government did not close Badeggi FM, did they?
No, not at all. Badeggi Radio, I'm sure Nigerians are aware that the general manager of Badeggi Radio was on air sometimes in last week, where she made mention that since the pronouncement of His Excellency to shut down Badeggi Radio, they have not gone off air even for a second.
Okay.
And that is to tell you that we respect the constitutional process and will allow NBC do its, to take the mandate, or allow NBC do diligence to our complaint.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Agbejule, I'm going to come to you now. You're in Niger State. So we want to look at it from both sides. Badeggi FM, what went wrong? What kind of what the details are regarding their conduct? And then the initial response from the state governor, how did that pan out with you? Do you think that that was sort of like an interference, a stifling of press freedom of sorts, that outright call out for the station to be closed? What do you think, Mr. Agbejule?
Well, the move from the government would not necessarily amount to stifling, because Badeggi had been broadcasting, and even these materials that you're talking about had already been in the media. It's already in the air. So, and when you look at the stifling, no, I don't think that's the way to go. The way that the Honourable Commissioner talked about dockets and all the rest, the major part of what goes on air is not going to be featuring in the dockets, because a lot of them are impromptu. They're from the outside, and there is no way that they are able to guide that one. And even from the get-go, it's a free way for people to broadcast, and there is no caution to tell people this is what you should say, this is how to say, this is what you shouldn't say. So everybody, it's a free reign of thought, and people just talk. And because there is an implicit disposition of the station to broadcast whatever comes. And in that manner, of course, there will be a lot of things that are being said that shouldn't be said, or that should have been said in different ways. So the communication part of it is the major problem that the station has. And of course, government will have issues when you're trying to tell them information and messages, but then the way that you take it is not the way that it should really be said, in such a way that it will make any impact on what the government does or the development of the state or communication itself. So decorum is out of it in a lot of sense. And that way, of course, you are bound to infringe on sentiments and emotions and the rest. The Badeggi had been on air for as long as I know, but I think that the caution of doing this is what they need now to do. And like I said, it's a learning curve, even though it's a very bitter, sweet one at this instant. That's my comment.
All right, Honourable, I must say thank you to the both of you for taking out the time to join us. I wish we can continue with this discussion, but unfortunately we are out of time. The Honourable Commissioner for Information for Niger State, Honourable Binta Mamman, as well as Mr. Akin Agbejule, who is a broadcaster and member of the National Governing Council of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. Gentlemen and lady, thank you for coming on.
So we are going to continue.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. We're going to continue with press freedom in Africa. Let's take a short break. We've got a host of other commentators who will be joining us after this. Do stay tuned.
Hey, welcome back. You're watching Breakfast Extra here on News Central Television. We are well into our second hour, and we've been talking about press freedom, but this time across Africa. Now, there's been instances scattered across the globe or scattered across the continent where press has been suppressed, and of course, the reach of reporters as well as journalists has been stifled. And so to continue this discussion, we're joined by a journalist joining us live from Cameroon, this time Yaoundé.
Yes, indeed. We're joined by Francis Ajimane, President, Cameroon Association of English-Speaking Journalists. He joins us now. Francis, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Francis, so recently, you guys welcomed the release of a student journalist who had been detained, an incident that kind of like highlights the real risks faced by young and emerging reporters in Cameroon. What does this case reveal about the current climate of media freedom in Cameroon?
It's not, good morning and thanks for having me on your show. It's not for us in Cameroon, it's not strange. This is something we journalists, especially in the current climate, political climate marked by the upcoming presidential elections in Cameroon. It's not strange. We know that we are going to face more and more challenges to reporting, because we've been battling with press freedom, I think, for almost 10 years now, since we know we have a conflict in the English-speaking parts of Cameroon. And since that conflict broke out in 2016, we have had a lot of challenges when it comes to press freedom. So we just know that with the political climate coming up, the situation will just be exacerbated. And we saw it last Monday with the arrest of a student journalist who was just going to cover proceedings at the Constitutional Court. There was a lot of tension in the air because the main opposition figure, who had his name, he had not been retained by the electoral council of the election management body, and so it was up to the Constitutional Court to uphold that decision, uphold or reinstate the political figure. And so we knew already as journalists that we knew that there was tension in the air, and we knew that we had to tread with caution. Unfortunately, that day, as we know what press freedom means to this regime and to us, and so we had the student journalists arrested. But thanks to the mobilization from journalists and across the country, we were able to get the student journalists free. But it's just a signal of what is to come in terms of press freedom or press crackdown during this period.
As you're talking about what's to come, we know that the elections are months away, the general elections. And broadly speaking, journalists in Cameroon, whether English-speaking or French-speaking, often face additional layers of scrutiny and marginalization. What does it say about the social-political climate and its influence on press freedom itself?
That climate has had a very huge impact on press freedom in Cameroon. We know that in Cameroon, we always say that you are free to say what you say, but you don't know the consequences that come after. So the social-political climate, as rightly said, would heavily or hugely impact, or has even been impacting the press freedom in Cameroon for a very long time now, because you cannot say what you want to say freely, or you are not sure that what you are going to say, you'll be safe after you say it. For example, I think about 7 years ago, we had post-elections litigation in Cameroon streamed live on television, and we all applauded that. That was press freedom, that we wanted to see proceeding at the Constitutional Court being aired or streamed on live television and national television. But we did not take into account that those post-elections litigations at the Constitutional Court 7 years ago were being streamed because they had no bearing, they had no consequence, because we already knew that the Constitutional Court, whose members are all appointed by the president in place, all loyalty to him, and so it was very difficult to see how they will cancel the election. But this time around, 7 years later, there is a pre-election litigation to force the Constitutional Court to reinstate the opposition leader. But we were surprised that the litigations or the hearings were not streamed live. The Constitutional Court didn't give permission to the media to stream it live, because so the media started asking, what is the Constitutional Court hiding from the public to know? And even journalists or citizen journalists or bloggers who had the courage to get into the proceedings and then try to get images or stream it live, their equipments were seized, and most of them were set out. Yes, the court said that you cannot stream proceedings live when you have not been given permission. So we begin to ask ourselves, what is the court hiding from the public that it doesn't want such an important, such a crucial stage in the life of the country to be streamed live?
Francis.
So,
Francis,
yes.
It's a very interesting dynamic you paint here, where it seems like the government, well, according to you, might be stifling the press, but it also uses the courts as an apparatus to do so. That's the kind of picture you're painting. We also have a saying here in Nigeria: there's freedom of press, but we cannot guarantee your freedom after press. That's the way we put it here. So it's kind of like what we're going through as well. But in that case, seeing as there are very similar there are similarities in both cases, in Cameroon, what reforms, what apparatus are journalists working together to put in place so they are assured security, so they are assured at least that freedom to do their work? Are there any bodies, are there any reforms or policies that are being backed by journalists in Cameroon?
Yes, I would say I would not say they are real. For more than 30 years now, journalists have been pushing and advocating for the Freedom of Information Act. Journalists and journalism and journalist associations have been pushing for the decriminalization of press offenses in Cameroon. We are not yet there, but we believe that we will be there. So while waiting to be there, journalists, we have various journalism movements or associations, like the one I belong to, Cameroon Association of English-Speaking Journalists, that we count on our solidarity. We come together and we count on our solidarity. We come together to organize trainings to see how we can reinforce our capacities. But we also used our association as a pressure group with other organizations, local or an international organization, and even within the government, we use as organization as a pressure group to force or to see how we can advocate for more or better press freedom. And if we weren't constituted in associations, I don't think some of the gains we would have had today. Let me tell you, it's because we were constituted in an association that the student journalists arrested alongside over 50 persons was the only person released from detention. The others are still in detention.
Oh, thanks for that information there.
Very, very much. Thank you. Francis, I must say thank you so much for taking out the time to join us and just giving us a bit of insight following on the press and journalism landscape and the challenges that journalists face in Cameroon. We must say thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, Francis. And switch gears from Cameroon and this time to Rwanda.
Uganda, actually.
Uganda, there we go. Joining us live is Darren Ballot. He's a journalist and Pan-African media commentator. Darren, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on. Now, you have covered media dynamics across the continent. What are the most worrying trends that you have observed in terms of, state tactics and, silencing dissents?
Wow, that is such an interesting question. But I think the biggest challenge that journalists are going to face, even as I speak now, because as Uganda, or in East Africa, you have Uganda, Tanzania, you have Malawi, all of them are getting into an election period of time, And so what happens here is that journalists are living on, let me call them three values. Even the word values may not even fit there, but here's what is happening. One, someone is either doing their job the way they are supposed to do it as a journalist, where you have to be truthful. Remember, you're in the fourth estate, and you have to give information to people as they need it, because they need access to information. And the only way to do it is through a journalist who is actually qualified to do the job. So that is one way. Number two is commercialization of journalism, which is a big challenge. And this is how people are living. Politicians are paying journalists to be able to do the job. And I don't know whether to call it a challenge or a good thing, but depending on the side of the conversation you want to follow on. But that's what I would say, that there's commercialization of journalism. But also number three, safety. For the principle of there is no story worth your life, you don't find it necessary to go and cover a story where you risk your life, you may lose it. I'll give an example. In 2021, I saw you flipping pictures of what happened here, journalists being beaten, their cameras are being shattered. So what happens is that journalists are now fearing to go and cover such stories because they don't know what they will lose, and most of them are actually freelancers. So if you're a freelancer journalist and you're carrying the equipment to go and cover a political leader who is probably on the opposition side, who is against the government, and I mean, you've seen it in Uganda here when people followed Bobby Wine, but Robert Chagulanyi started contesting against President Yoweri Museveni. We've seen it in Tanzania where journalists have been trying to follow Tundu Lissu. Those ones who are on those search trails are beaten and they lose equipment. They find themselves in jail. So journalists are making decisions to either do their job or ignore the information that they're supposed to give the people, or just sit out of the profession or become an activist and join the other side. So journalism to me is just becoming a profession where you live on the edge and you have to make decisions between what you cover and what you not cover, because you're not guaranteed, like you said. I had to say that there's freedom of press or freedom of speech, but no one's going to guarantee you freedom after whatever you've done.
Indeed, Darren.
Even during the job.
Darren, it's a very worrying picture you paint here, especially personally being a press person for the past 20 years. I can understand where you talk about of an instance where there's a commercialization of the press. So in that vein, what are people like you, Puritans, who are journalists, doing to maybe separate the ill ones from the actual press people? Is there perhaps maybe a body of fronts that's being put together? Maybe, in fact, a Pan-African Press Foundation or group or association. What do you think about that? And are there any efforts?
Yes, is that these bodies are there. We have the Uganda Journalism Association, which brings together journalists to come together and discuss on how to, have meaningful discussions with the government on their safety. However, I can give you a long history of these conversations that the journalists have had with the government, but they still never yield any fruit. They are beaten. As recent as this year, you will find a by-election that we just had recently, about 4 months ago. Journalists were not allowed to cover, were beaten, and one almost lost their eye. But we still go back to the conversations and have conversations with security organs where they only apologize and also have charity matches to say we are sorry, but again, the cycle continues. So I think the best thing is, seek legal redress, but again, going to courts and trying to put measures or discuss principles with maybe parliament and things like that, make sure that journalists are safe. It just never happens. You can go to all countries where there's a problem of probably dictatorship and less press freedoms. You will see that there are discussions to allow journalists to do their job. However, every time it comes around the election cycle, we just go back to apologizing and say we are sorry. We did this, but you see, we couldn't differentiate between you and the citizen journalist who is probably doing their job in the wrong way. You need to identify yourself. I mean, we've done all this. The government has talked about it. Even in Kenya here, governments have advised journalists to wear their press jackets, have their IDs, have all this. But again, it looks like you identifying yourself, you put yourself more in the target. Because then they'll say, oh, Darren, you're a journalist, so you're not going to be allowed to cover this. Bring your camera, walk away, and go. So it looks like identifying yourself, the measures that we are talking about are simply not working. You just put yourself in a target instead.
Darren, I mean, as we wrap up this discussion with you so we can let you go, I must ask, right, in terms of all the hits that the entire continent have faced in the last decade, whether it's protests and wars to, cracking down on dissent to juntas, military juntas, where is the future of media? Where does the future of journalism lie when it comes to shaping the narrative and the stories coming out of Africa?
That is such a fantastic question. Actually, I've asked myself a number of times where it's going to be, but here's where it's going to be. And in my prediction, the profession of journalism is going to go down because of high censorship. And then the citizen journalism is the one picking up faster because anybody who has a camera is able to report a story. And those are the guys who are now forming podcasts to discuss discussions that me and you could have been having on this TV, giving information. You now find this information where unprofessional journalists are the ones discussing it in a biased way, of course, and most times people are sensational. So they prefer to have sensational things that speak to them and how they believe in them. It's not what they're discussing all over all these social media sites. No, what's happening is even professional journalists like myself are taking the direction of maybe let me go where there's less censorship. And I'm talking about social media. I'm going to give views. I'm going to report a story as I see it and what I believe in it. But here's the problem. The government also comes up with other measures, taking off the internet. I'm sure you've heard this. Uganda takes off internet every time elections is coming by, at least in the last 2 cycles. They slow down internet in Tanzania. They have slowed down internet in Kenya before when protests are happening. They've slowed down internet in Mozambique before actually switched it off. The same happens in Sudan. So every time journalists and citizen journalism try to say, maybe let's leave this thing because TV may be more censored and radio may be more censored, let's go on the internet and do it on the internet. That is a good innovation. However, you don't have that power to put on the internet and switch it off. The people who are in charge are the ones who are going to put it off. So I feel like journalism is going to be highly censored. I mean, it's not only Africa. It's America does the same. UK is doing the same on TikTok. So we are killing journalism because of policies, and we don't want people to see what they actually need to see, and we're going to just leave journalism to unprofessionals who are citizen journalism, and that's why you come in and you want fact check everything. Likely you're going to run away with fake news.
Darren, very interesting points you made there regarding how the internet is actually used or not used. How that apparatus is switched off by certain, bodies that be. Let's put it that way, governments. We also kind of like suspected such here in Nigeria as well. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, there was
last election, we're like, why is our internet not
slow,
working?
and then there's the ban of Twitter as well.
Exactly. So it also seems like as if there is a note being taken when it comes to how information is spread and by whom. It's the younger generation who are jumping into guerrilla journalism now and are taking that advantage and putting out information. And that's why the authorities are noting and they're pulling out the plug. However, we have joining us now Catherine Maludi from Malawi, journalist Times 360. Thank you very much for joining us, Catherine. You joined at a very interesting point at this conversation here. And we're wondering what it is like in Malawi. Who are the champions of press freedom now? Are they the guerrilla journalists, like the young people? What is the climb like in Malawi?
Okay, in terms of press freedom, or what I would say is that there are some strides that have been made since the past 5 years, but still journalists in Malawi still face so many challenges. In terms of the strides that have been made, I would say in the past we had the defamation law, which now the Constitutional Court a few weeks ago has taken off. Now the defamation is no longer a criminal offense. It is something that can be dealt with at the civil court. So that I would take it as a good move towards press freedom. And there was also some sedition laws which were also taken off 2 years ago, where the name president was a protected emblem. Each time someone made a comment on the name president or said something negative about the president, we saw people being arrested. But now that law has been taken off, it has been repealed. So the president, like the name president, is no longer a protected emblem. But still, we are facing so many challenges. I would give an example where some months ago, a journalist had to run away from the country. Because he reported something about the Malawi Defense Force, which at the moment still people are afraid to report anything about the Malawi Defense Force. So after he did that report, he was being targeted, and we saw that journalist running away from Malawi for some months until he just returned recently. And I would also give another example where you understand in Malawi, this is an election period. We are just some 30 days away to elections. So there was a presentation of nomination papers for those who have expressed interest to contest in the coming election. So there was the president of the ruling party also presenting his nomination papers there. So what happened? Journalists were given a platform to ask questions at that event, to ask questions to the current president, who was also presenting his nomination papers showing interest to contest. And most questions that were asked to the president, if they came somehow in a way that the party supporters, the MCP supporters, did not like, we saw... journalists there, saying things
Right,
that were
okay.
targeting journalists, some journalists there, and we saw some journalists even being escorted by police officers and some hired
Catherine.
security men because they are being targeted by party supporters. I remember I also asked a question to the president that why should Malawians give him another 5 years after people have gone into so many challenges in the past 5 years he has been president.
Catherine.
I was booed there in the, yes?
Yes, I hate to cut you, but we're pressed for time, and I just want to really squeeze this in as you are, giving your submission. You talked about, the challenges that journalists in Malawi faced, and they still face. And you also talked about, the embargoes, or should I say, the way that there are words that have now been criminalized and decriminalized. And it's also very similar to what we have here in Nigeria in terms of the Cyberbullying Act and how that has been skewed, to somewhat be like a tool of dissent when you're going online to talk, And so I have to talk about the way media is shifting with the times from traditional media, which is radio and television, to now digital media. And with all of that comes the emergence of AI, right? I wonder how that is used, to disseminate information and also misinform Malawians, especially during a time as critical as the elections.
Okay, talking about that, we've also seen the citizen journalism increasing on the increase here in Malawi. Because most issues, you would see that there would be a news story, maybe that a mainstream media house cannot carry, just because maybe they're afraid of lawsuits and whatsoever. Because in Malawi, media houses are not doing so well. So there can be a story, a powerful story, wanting to expose something, but then the media houses would vet that story, look at it, and in the end decide not to publish it just because they're afraid of lawsuits. So we've now seen the citizen journalism taking over because even those whistleblowers, they have seen that the major media houses are afraid of reporting on some issues. So they would take those tips and give to the citizen journalists. So we've seen so many misinformation, fake news on the social media, just because those are not censored. If there's a certain story, someone who is just a social media influencer would just rush to post it. They will not even vet that story, which is unlike what we do in the mainstream media, where we need to verify the story to balance it before we publish. So citizen journalism in Malawi is on the increase just because it's not censored.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. Let me come back to Darren. Darren, similar question here regarding the use of AI and journalism, not just AI, but all the tools that are readily available online. How does this form journalistic practices in your country?
In fact, there is a committee that has been put in place by the Uganda Communications Commission to come up with some policies on how to use AI to avoid instances where fake news may be spread. However, that said, there is also a tendency of politicians to make statements that go out, and in fact, when they are factual, but they end up denying them, saying that is AI. So they are now accusing AI to have done things here, and many times it has happened. But yes, I think we are in a very dangerous era, and we've learned as journalists and also as people, we try to educate people how to verify images that they come across, because I mean, you could have seen it in Kenya, where a young man lost his life called Boniface. I think he did something, posted something on social media, and was picked up. You see images of Ruto being formed in a casket, and all those people have been arrested and aligned in court. So as journalists, we try our level best to remain with our basic principles of then that we had before all this internet, whereby you must have contacts to people who you call to verify information, rather than just run away with it. We saw this in COVID, where rumors were spreading that, oh, the president has probably succumbed to COVID, or he's now very ill. yet he wasn't, just because a helicopter was landing somewhere and picking up something to take and say, that is the presidential helicopter. He could be very sick and would die. So they are coming up with a lot of principles and some regulations as we get into the election cycle to make sure that we are able to verify with who. So the government is putting up, I'll call it like contacts, a contact list for who to call, especially in elections, who do you call in electoral commission, and then also political parties are putting up contacts of who do you call in the political parties to verify certain information. Otherwise, the likelihood of misinformation is going to go so up, especially when the days of voting comes. People will come up with all kinds of results that are going to come out, forging papers to say this is the winner in this constituency, yet it's not going to be. So I think the most important thing is going back to the principles of journalism in terms of verification, so that you don't find yourself running away with what my sister just said, Catherine, here, that influencers are putting up information, activists are putting up information, but you also need to understand most of them are biased. So you need to understand the spirit in which they publish this kind of information, or else you're going to find yourself in a very dangerous place. So as we all come to the internet and see information online, the most important thing is when I pick it up, I have to call you, who I know. For example, News Central Africa usually gets to me and asks me questions whether something is right or wrong in Uganda, and then I'll tell them, yes, this is it or not, because I work in one of the biggest media houses in East Africa, so why not? I have access to this kind of information. So the most important thing is going back to the principles of journalism, where we verify information with the right sources. Otherwise, in the spirit of AI, anybody can generate a video of me speaking right now saying that someone has won an election, and then you publish it, and then problems come.
Right. Let me come to you, Catherine, right? As we're talking about AI and digital media, earlier you were talking about, how the younger or citizens are also stepping in to, provide news and do their own bit in sort of shaping the narrative and shaping the future of Malawi. But where does that lie in the traditional media and journalism space itself, in onboarding more younger generation, whether it's Gen Z, to take up the mantle and passing the baton on from Malawi? Where does that lie, and how are you shaping the future voices for journalism in Malawi?
Here in Malawi, I would say many young people are showing interest in studying journalism. We've seen an increase in terms of young journalists. Even at the moment, it's very rare to see older people in the newsrooms. Most of the journalists we have currently are young people. And most of them, I should say, have embraced the use of AI in journalism. And I would say it's not that much. It's not that much. Not most journalists, not most young journalists are using AI. But we've also seen these citizen journalists who are young and on social media abusing AI. Recently, we saw a picture that was in circulation that the former president, Binta Mamman, is very sick and on wheelchair. And there was a picture that was circulating on the social media that he is on the wheelchair at the moment and very sick. That was an AI-generated picture. So if you look at this picture, it was generated by someone, a citizen journalist, who just sat somewhere, developed the picture, and then posted it on the social media, and many people believed it. So in terms of the citizen journalists, many people are abusing the AI, circulating fake stories, making up videos that the president is speaking. And during this election period, we've seen a lot of abuse, a lot of AI abuse, unlike in the mainstream media, where many young people are using AI professionally. Maybe most of the time, just having it edit, they are already done stories and whatsoever. So they are using it wisely, unlike in the other sector, where citizens just come up, make some videos, make up some stories, and post them on the social media. So the abuse mainly is happening on the part of the citizen journalists, not on the mainstream journalists.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Catherine Maludi, want to say thank you very much for joining us. Also, Darren, Darren joined from Uganda there. Darren, thank you very much for joining us to have this very interesting conversation. Not
Yes,
just
indeed.
you two, we had a host of other guests. I want to say a special thank you to Honourable Binta Mamman, Commissioner, Ministry of Information Strategy, Niger State. Also, Mr. Akin Agbejule, who joined us earlier, broadcaster and member of National Governing Council, Nigeria Institute
Yes, indeed.
of Public Relations.
We also had Harriet Atiang, who is a station manager at Dada Radio Kenya, who joined us live in Kenya to give us insight on journalism in Kenya. Also, Francis Adjumani, who is a president at Cameroon Association of English-Speaking Journalists, Yaoundé in Cameroon. And finally, many thanks to Professor Itsi Sikanku, who unfortunately we couldn't bring him on, but he was going to join us live from Ghana. He's a professor at the University of Media, Arts and Communication, UNIMAC. Pretty much all. Gentlemen, I must say thank you. Ladies, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Joining
for 60
us.
minutes, actually.
I
60
know.
minutes of a very interesting,
Non-stop.
robust conversation on press freedom in Africa, the ethics, the challenges, and we hope that we continue to see a fight for our freedom as press people.